Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Hello, it's Dr. Gemma, and this is episode 207 of the new series of the Cognitive Podcast, and I guess I'm just going to call this one Deep Breaths. This is a little awkward because I recorded this on Sunday, and then I realized there was no way I could release it as it was recorded this past Sunday. I think that would have been the 2nd, something like that, the 9th, the 10th, the 3rd. I couldn't release it as recorded because I realized the outcome of the American presidential election was going to so change the way you heard this episode, let alone the way I felt about the episode itself. So you're going to hear parts of it that were recorded then and parts of it as overlay that I'm recording here on Thursday, September 7th. I'm going to give you the update since I did the recording. Well, we all know what happened in the American presidential election, and that has affected a lot of us, and that is going to affect at least the way I do the strategy in this episode, which is the major reason I'm changing it. So I'm sorry if this episode is choppy and sounds kind of confusing at points. You have to keep in mind that I now know the outcome of the election. The other thing is I had to really think about what is this podcast. And it was very meaningful to me that one of our groups, and I guess this is the warm thanks for this week as well, one of our groups said in a post to me privately, so I'm not going to say who it was, "Don't soothe me, don't calm me." And I thought, you have to be kidding. I can't even do it for myself right now. And I really value that she said, your podcast is a safe place. And I thought, am I safe because we're not talking about these issues? Am I safe because I talk about it enough so you know my stance? Am I safe because I'm going to talk about it a lot? I don't know how you can not talk about what's going on right now, so I don't think it's going to be completely absent from the podcast, but I am trying to make the decision to stay on target, to quote Star Wars, as to this is a knitting psychology podcast, and I don't want to do a lot of preachiness about political views, and that's not the arrant cowardice that it might sound like. What it is comes down to this. If you're doing what I do, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, you understand that change is going to happen based on your personal actions. But you are not individualist. Your actions are supporting the well-being of the entire group. We understand that positive change happens because we model positive change actively in a group of people, and other people respond to the modeling. So I can't make anybody change. I can only be the change that I want people to see, and expect that because humans function by mentoring and teaching and learning from each other and imitating each other, if I'm a good role model, that is the best thing I can do. And so I really do believe by modeling the values that we talk about in the podcast, I'm making a pretty clear political statement without going on about which party is which. Having said that, we're going to get on with the rest of the episode. And again, I apologize for the chop. And then I lost the original from last Sunday. So, what a week, huh? Everybody take some deep breaths. Let me get on. Thank goodness I have the notes. With the warm thanks to our own Kath Wood, who sent us some great information on a podcast called Why I Knit. This is a psychologist who interviews other knitters talking about why you knit. What a great idea. I wish I'd thought of that. Thank you, Cathwood, as always. It's always good to have another person in my profession who understands what it's like. Meanwhile, what's on my hooks and needles? Well, I finished my very pretty rug. This is the rug that I made from the leftover super bulky pure wool that was left behind at CFRX. And I blended it, as I told you, with 3 strands of acrylic. And each strand was a different color. So there was a silver blue, a medium blue, and a purple. And the reason I did this was, as you can see looking at it, the acrylic makes it come out very regular in shape. The yarn, if it's just wool, will be kind of wavy and a little bit odd. The other thing is, it has not been washed yet, but when it is washed, it will felt. That's the whole point. Previous experience with this same experiment showed me that when it felts, it will still retain that lovely rectangular shape. Now in that picture, if you look next to my left foot, you will see my last major rug. This was completely made out of roving. Pure wool, Chero, and no acrylic mixed in with it. And you can see it's wavy just a little bit. That rug is the softest rug I have ever made, and it's wonderful. It absorbs everything and is incredibly soft after multiple washings. But I have to admit, for sheer durability and retaining its shape, the wool mixed with the acrylics works just a bit better. You can see it here. It is crocheted on a previous rug. If you go back through my Ravelry page, you will see it when I knitted it. Works really well. Also, I finished the skirt. This is one of my 13 seam, something like that, skirts. And this is out of the incredibly beautiful fabric I got at the quilting store in San Jose with Gigi and Jasmine Knitmore. This was an easy, pleasant run, and I deeply enjoyed it. I was working on other skirts out of flannel. I did not like the way I cut them. That was my mistake, being a little too hasty. So they're going to be repurposed into quilt strips and liners for bags, which I'm making. So there you go. There is the skirt with the black cats and witch hats, is what it says on its own label. And it's very comfortable. Of course, it's a cotton and it's lovely. So, in progress, the stash toss. Well, 43 in versus 61 out, because I took out 10 skeins with that rug. Probably 11 if I counted one of the acrylics. I have not worked on those sock blanks from Steffi Jo yet. I have not worked on the 10 square bag, but I can tell what's going to line it. It's going to be that beautiful fabric. The Yule socks, I should tell you that I'm still on the foot of sock number 1. And in episode 208, I will show you the finished sock number 1, because since I started recording this, I have actually finished it, but that's for next week. I haven't done any other work on the Lakeside cardigan or the Vestuary 24. I haven't done any spinning. And the strategy is coming up. And of course, it's from a couple days ago. And it's about where we're going from here. There is one more thing to say, though. Now, I say in the notes, everybody take a deep breath. One of the things I think we have to face is that we have a crisis, and I am a trained crisis clinician. And when I say crisis, I mean what's called a critical incident, a disaster. And I did years of training with the International Critical Incident Stress people. And what I want you to know, and I think it hasn't been said partly because I'm in a crisis like all the rest of you. When you have a disaster on this scale, like a mass shooting, or your country agrees to elect, anyway, when you have this, you have to worry because in the first 48 to 72 hours, people are in shock and they don't respond well. And that includes me. There's no question I felt in shock. And so what do we tell people in that time? We tell them that they need to avoid alcohol, avoid drugs, including any form of THC. If you think weed will make you feel better, no. And we tell them to avoid sugar and carb because people start stressing and that drives you to eat high carb. That's true of everybody, not just those of us with diabetes or pre-diabetes. So in that crisis, that's what we tell people. And we tell them, don't make changes and sleep where you can. Try to get sleep. Try to get rest. So I'm going to include the strategy I recorded 2 days ago, thinking I was recording it after the original where I just talked about deep breaths to calm down. And we're going to go to that strategy now, but I do feel it's necessary to point out that we have been in a state of crisis, as one is after a disaster. And I think at least some of us have. I certainly feel like I've been. And I think that you just have to hold steady until that first sense of crisis moves past you. And you have to try to keep as normal as you can. I made an attempt to video call Jasmine and Gigi the other night, and I was really delighted because I really couldn't, because number one, my husband, feeling sorry for me, was trying to pamper me, and I went off in that direction. But also, I found that Jasmine was doing one of the things I would recommend. She was busily working on a community project. She was going to a community meeting for her kids' schools. That's the kind of thing we need to be doing now. We need to stay with our normal lives and just see how things will unfold. And here comes the strategy. So in my somewhat disjointed original strategy here, I talk about the need for everybody to take a deep breath, whatever happened in the election. But it's really very scary now to be an American. We just elected a fascist regime. There's no two ways about it. They're going to control the bodies of women. They were actively quoting the Nazi Party at their last big rally in Madison Square Garden. They are selectively disenfranchising Americans of color. The jokes about Puerto Ricans at that Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden. This is very, very scary. And so I'm going back to our listener who said, don't try to soothe me. Don't try to make it better. Don't try to calm me. What I'm going to say instead is, now that we know it's going to take more than deep breaths, it's going to take a lot of personal action and a lot of personal thought, because things are going to change here in my native country in about 8 weeks. And there's going to be a lot of things you probably need to do in advance of that. And so I'm going to try and look at some of the actions that may be a little less obvious. Having said that, we have to support each other. We have to be here with each other. We have to be here for each other. We have to stay with our siblings who are marginalized or different, whether it's by gender, skin color, national origins. We now have to commit to that. And how we're going to do that, I hope, will unfold. I think more and more people are going to see what to do and have ideas. I think we also have to recognize that it has been openly stated that we're going to start losing basic rights, that they're taking away freedom of speech, that anybody who has been seen as an attacker of the incoming regime is going to be openly attacked, prosecuted. It sounds like it's going to be very scary. So right now I want to give you all these strategies that I don't have. I think at this point I've heard two really good things. One was another longtime listener who I cherish, who basically put on the internet, if you're in a red state and you're having problems getting health care, come to my house in California. I promise you we'll put you up while you need the care, while you get what you need, and we'll try to help you cover your trail. Yes, I think it may get that personal, that we have to have people coming to us and we have to help them where we can. The other good one I heard was, renew your passport now, because it's already backed up and you don't want to start trying to do it when they're taking these things away. I would really tell you too, if you're a non-Christian, if you're a person of color, and if you're a woman who's menstruating, yeah, you're the ones I think that are going to get the restrictions on your travel. So I would be upgrading those passports, your real ID, anything you have. And also I would tell you, give up your travel plans for going to states that restrict this. Heaven knows, if you're a person of color or you're a woman in any phase of pregnancy, you're just going to have to stay out of those states. It's just not going to be safe. I imagine there will be other strategies forthcoming. And they're going to be very, in this moment, things, do this now, do not do that kind of strategies. In other words, it's great when I talk about the big skills like accepts or improve for distress tolerance. But now we're going to have day-to-day needs like don't forget you can't go to this place. Don't forget that this is not going to be safe for you. Don't forget that you have to plan in advance to make certain things happen, because it's likely that significant parts of our population are going to lose major freedoms and major rights. And I am really sorry that I have ever had to say this on the podcast. And you can say, well, you're panicking, but remember, when I started this podcast in 2009, women had the right to control their own body and through that their own destiny. And already they're talking about tracking our menstrual periods, not letting us cross state lines if we're menstruating or pregnant. And they've overturned Roe versus Wade. So in the time this podcast has been running, significant freedoms have been taken. Oh, and I forget the attempts to ban Islamic people from travel. How could I forget that? And not even going into police violence against people of color, am I? So this is the change we have seen since I started this podcast. And so when I talk like this, I apologize. I know I sound alarmist. I'm trying not to. But now it's going to come down to these small, thoughtful actions that you have to take in advance. You have to be proactive about a lot of this stuff to protect yourself and your family as best you can. Okay, back to more optimistic days on the podcast 5 days ago. Oh, shoot. Well, I went a-shamming last weekend, and I had a lot of distance last weekend. I'm very pleased about it. First off, I was worried because on Thanksgiving morning I have a turkey trot. This is a traditional running thing, and that is the day you're going to pig out. You want to go for a big old run in the morning so you feel like you have some kind of calorie deficit going on. You could argue that will make you eat more. Actually, after you do hard exercise, you usually lose the urge to eat for several hours. Do with this what you will. I was really worried about that turkey trot course. If you look at the two pictures under Aw Shoot in the show notes, did I mention you can find those at our blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com? Or you can find it in the show notes on Ravelry, just saying. Okay, if you look at that first picture, you will see it's an aerial picture of the course. It's got some mean mountains in it, and there's two major hills in it. So I went out and I tried to figure it out from that map, which was not easy. But I managed to do 5K, and I seemed to hit all the stuff there. I'm really glad I did it. It is not hard because of the hills. It's hard because the substance you're running on is sandy dirt, and that eats energy. So when your foot hits it, it absorbs the energy from your foot, and it does not throw energy back into your foot. If you run on asphalt, which is really tough on your legs, that's why it's tough on your legs, because it's shoving energy hard back into your legs because asphalt won't absorb energy. If you think that's bad, you ought to try running on concrete. It's a nightmare. Okay, so this one would not be that bad, but I'm not looking to cover myself with glory on this one because it's got some mean hills in that sandy dirt. However, it is a good run. I've run in this park before, back before they built it up this much, and we ran on the flat several loops around, and boring. So I'm kind of glad about this. But you can see the insane turkey trot course that I am going to try on Thanksgiving morning. I plan to take my son with me so that he can humble me yet again because he runs this thing really fast. Meanwhile, I woke up Sunday morning and said, boy, I'm sore. Boy, I have the Santa Clarita 5K this next weekend and I haven't shammed the course. So you can also see the course map provided thoughtfully by the Santa Clarita 5K people. And I went out and shammed that. And it was a great run. I really recommend this. It looks like it's downhill because anytime you run from north to south, everybody thinks you're running downhill. Good news, it is. But it's not a steep downhill at all. It's very gradual. And then you do this sort of 90-degree turn to the left and run along the banks of what should be the Santa Clarita River. And it's actually a very nice run on these trails, and on your left you can see housing developments and all that, and you can sort of track where you are. This was a good run because you run downhill and you run out of the wind, which there was a lot of last weekend. And as you're running along the riverbank, that protects you, and there's a lot of shade, which is unusually pleasant. This whole course is unusually pleasant for its shade. So then I turned around, obviously, and came back, because it's an out and back. And running up the hill back towards the park where it starts was not a big issue either. It was actually very pleasant. In fact, I continued to run uphill along a course that I've run previously in races, but not this one, and found that it was miserable, hot, and exposed with no shade out on the hot asphalt. So I ran a mile of that and turned around just to get in the extra mile and use up the time on my running program. So this is nice. The Santa Clarita 5K is this Sunday, and it looks to be a very, very pleasant course. And of course, both days I went over to Baby Tuna and pigged out, and you can see my pig out. There you go. I had it one day sitting there, and the next day I had it in my car as a picnic, and I deeply enjoyed it. If you live in this area, I want to tell you something. Tip big at Baby Tuna. Tip generously. You will get more food than you would believe. Just saying. So by the time you hear this, I will probably be in the middle of, I will be finished the Santa Clarita 5K actually. So you can see my countdown there from last Sunday where I had 6 days and 18 hours left. By the time you hear this, I'll probably be having brunch with the beloved son somewhere. After that, you can see the upcoming runs. I think the ones that matter to me, the Turkey Trot that I just showed you the course for, that will be on November 28th, of course. And that's the beginning of my 4-day holiday. And the one after that, the Jingle Jog, that's the beginning of Romule. Yeah, the good times are upon us, at least in terms of vacation. And then you can see my races into next year, still looking for a race in January. Also found out this week I signed up for the Sugar Daddy as a 10K. No, I will be going in and changing that. Meanwhile, in the fluffy books, I did finally finish Flavia Albia, A Fatal Legacy. This is not one of the strongest entries in the series. This is one of those books you read because you really enjoy the characters. And I did, and so I have to say I liked it. I started and finished The Reluctant Widow, listening to it at night. Actually, I think I started that last week in 206 because it seems to me Cutiful Christina was commenting on it. Yeah, that's right, because Christina, and thank you for the comment, Christina, she was saying she liked it and she thought it was funny. It had a bad narrator. He was garbled and hard to understand, and that took a lot of the fun out of it. He didn't do too badly on the women's voices. A lot of male narrators can't do women's voices without sounding really stupid. But he did a pretty good job there, but I didn't like that, and I think his emphasis, to me, it just sounded creepy. The things that were going on, that the nobleman keeps the widow in this house, and he keeps telling her it's not dangerous, and it is. It really is. And I think that's why I was having problems with it. There is a certain humor to it, Christina was saying, but I really had to struggle for it, and that may have been the narrator. Something I really like. Well, my copy of the book, Craft Psychology, by Dr. Ann Kirketerp arrived. Great book. Great book. Couldn't put it down. You know how you know a book is great? I went to the bibliography first. Found a lot of things I'd read in my time and knew and loved and respect. This woman is it. Like most European researchers, she writes in a more drawn out style with a lot more repetition and a lot less economy than I think you would normally find in an American book. And it's really pleasant to read this style because she really makes sure that you're getting it. She takes you over the points that you need. She reminds you when you need to be reminded. In other words, it doesn't read like a doctoral dissertation, although I suspect at one time it was. She puts a lot of emphasis on how this is good for women's health, and it encourages women to be in groups. And she lets you draw your own conclusions about how this would work for everybody. In fact, there's a man on the cover crafting. And I am reminded of the fact that in Western Europe, at least, where I have traveled, men do craft, and they're encouraged to craft. And it's very strange, after living in the UK for 2.5 years, when I came back to America, I found it really odd how little crafting men were doing here. And I feel like this is a real deficit for men in our culture, that they don't have a sense of creativity or accomplishment unless they're a declared artist, in which case they also get a lot of flack for it in many cases. And so I think what you have is people feeling forced to do their creativity through the internet, through being an influencer, through podcasting. Now, here I sit podcasting, so obviously I don't mind that much. But you see what I'm saying, I think. Okay, I'm moving pretty rapidly here. Thank you for your patience. Put a lid on it. Well, I found this awesome graphic about build your cucumber salad. And these are 5 ingredient, not 4 ingredient salad combinations where you can build a low calorie and, in my world, fairly high fat, well, reasonable fat, not high fat at all, in fact, cucumber salad. These are very simple recipes with very simple ingredients. And the hope is you just go and stock your pantry. Like, the ingredients are, of course, cucumbers, soy sauce, sesame oil, chili oil, garlic is one, or salmon and onion or cream cheese and bagel spice, tuna, spicy mayo, scallions, sesame seeds, and so on. These are very straightforward, very easy recipes where if you just have a few things in the pantry, you can throw these together. Or if you go to the grocery store and you take the graphic with you, it would take very, very little to make these happen. These are an excellent side dish, a really good accompaniment to anything, or a light summery lunch. The blather. Well, last week it got cold, and so you can see me wearing my warm clothes. And I'm wearing first my Me Maids for day wear. There is one of the flannel skirts. In fact, I'm wearing this even as I speak. My beloved turtleneck, of course. But a hand-knitted vest, one of the previous vestuary vests, in fact. And I'm wearing hand-knitted socks in that. And I'm so happy because there is nothing like the Me Maids, and I will be wearing them for the next 30 years. Yes, I will. Underneath that, you can see me in the winter version of my running kit, and I love it. I'm really shocked at how warm and comfortable I am. I used to always be cold running in the winter. I don't know why I'm not, but I suspect it's because I'm a fat-burning animal more than a carb-burning animal. You can also see, if you pay attention to that picture, that I am wearing Me-made fingerless mitts. You may remember those. I made them, I think, last year. They're fairly recent, out of leftover sock yarn and an incredibly beautiful silk blend. They were horrifyingly difficult to make with a very easy pattern using just a Lion brand yarns pattern that's free. But they came out perfect, and they, of course, match my green top, so they've been my winter mitts. So, yes, it is the warm clothes and Me Made time, and I'm showing off. I also want to point out that we don't deserve dogs. That this week, my dear friend Debbie had to say goodbye to the remarkable Beam Me Up Mr. Scott. That was his name. She got him over 11 years ago. He was difficult to train, as collies can be, because they're very, very smart. So they push back until they figure out it's better to just get along. Yes, that is a real cover of Time magazine, and Scotty is on it. They did a special issue on the 100 most influential pets in America. Scotty was the cover boy, because look how pretty, huh? Scotty was an amazing friend to Debbie. She trained him as a therapy dog for herself. And Debbie, the bones in her legs are so fragile, one time she stood up and they simply shattered under her. Months of surgery. Scotty was with her the whole time. When I met Debbie, what was remarkable to me, she would stand up and stretch her right hand down and lay her palm open at 90 degrees to her arm. Scotty would immediately position himself under it. This is why Debbie, who's a petite little thing, never needed a walker, because she had Scotty. I met them at Sunnybank, and we would go every year for the 6 years I went out there to dinner at Thatcher McGee's, the local Irish pub in Pompton Lakes. We would go on Thursday night. I would fly in Thursday afternoon. I'd be exhausted. And Debbie would say, now don't feed him treats. He's working. And I'd say, okay. And Scotty would go under the table, and this long, gentle nose would touch my knee. And I'd start feeding him bits of meat. And meanwhile, Debbie, who is incredibly hardworking with Scotty, would just have a drink or two, because she often was afraid to do that. But I was driving, and Scotty was making sure she was walking okay. And so we would sit there, and we'd get mellow together. And Scotty would be under the table getting treats that I wasn't supposed to give him. I am sure good old Debbie, who's in that picture on the right, knew what I was doing and was too much of a lady to say it. Scotty did hundreds of visits to the Walter Reed Military Hospital. He was extremely well known by all the famous people who passed through it. And then the military hospital got behind this movement to give people who get honorable discharges from the military a stipend to have a therapy dog. And Scotty became a poster child for this. And yes, Scotty, with Debbie, of course, was invited to address Congress. And it's just wonderful. The pictures of them in the Capitol are so beautiful. And he was given enormous respect by both sides of the aisle when he spoke before Congress. What really went on, of course, was Debbie talked about what it's like to take a therapy dog into a military hospital. We lost Scotty this past week because, well, it was a tough week, wasn't it? And this was just one more of the disasters in my heart that happened this week. So I would like to say farewell to you, my dear Scotty. We never deserved you. Job well done. Okay, I got to pull myself together for a minute because that's a hard friend to lose, let me tell you. You can see under that the community resources, the links to the books I've used, to my favorite resources to buy to support my crafting, and to the skills and techniques that I love. You can also see my link tree. Needs to be updated. I think the Monster Dash is still on that one, so I'll have to update that picture. You can also see links to the kind folk who sponsored CFR10. Cutiful Yarns, I'm told she's not producing anymore, but Christina, I can't bear to take it down. On the calendar, you can see the local groups in the Santa Clarita Valley, all of whom can be looked up on Facebook, which is why there's no links, and their meetups, including the SCV Free Craft Exchange, which I highly recommend. And then you can see my calendar. Of course, by the time you see this, I will be probably, let me think. No, you're going to hear this on November 9th. So yeah, I'll have a day to go before that 5K. I was getting that wrong. And then, of course, you can see I have November 28th through December 1st off for Thanksgiving. I have a turkey trot on the 28th on Thanksgiving Day. Romule, I think I got approved from December 21st through December 29th. I think I'm working the 30th and 31st. Like, I care because nobody's going to show up. But I do have a jingle jog up in Palmdale on the 21st at Marie Kerr Park. Just telling you that, Rets. Just want you to hear it. And then you can see the dates for my runs next year. Finally, we have, of course, CFR 11 on October 11th, 2025. Hopefully somewhere in here I'm going to sit down and make that link and work it out because Loretta already gave me a fabulous template for it. Minerva gets the last word. As I sit here talking to you, she's on the back of my chair and she's bouncing around. Oh, she's getting off now because she knows I'm finishing. And she hears me talking about her, don't you? But in the picture, you can see her lying on the bed next to my leg after a long run. And she is paying me that great compliment that I talked about last time. That is a companionship that I treasure. And in this case, she is lying next to me. I have been so out and about so much this past few months that she really has been distressed when she thinks I'm getting ready for a run or when I'm going to leave the house. So she has taken to lying against me a lot more often. And she's also my alarm clock when I'm seeing patients at about 50 after the hour. She comes in and jumps in my lap. That is her telling me, get up, because now we have to go to the bathroom together. That is, we go into the restroom, and she gets to her food dish and eats and purrs while I, use the restroom. And she talks to me and purrs at me, and I pet her. And she likes to do this every hour because she knows I need to go there anywhere once an hour. I forgot to tell you that October 27th was National Black Cat Day, according to the Old Farmer's Almanac. So there is the poster again that I think I posted last week. Having said all this, been a hard week, everybody. Remember, more than ever, we are a community, and we're going to come through this as a community if we're going to come through it at all. That what you do for the community, you are doing for the individual. That the idea that you can be on your own and be that individual is pretty phony. And so when you help the community, you are helping yourself. On that happy note, everybody stay safe, Take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.